Hello and welcome to Alliance Against Northern Pass, update on the Northern Pass project. I'm Heather McLean, and with me today is Jack Savage from the Forest Society in Concord, and we're going to give you the latest update on the easement that they have actually purchased to help block the Northern Pass, and lots of other information to go along with that. I just wanted to mention that for those of you who are not exactly familiar with this project, it's a venture with PSNH and their parent company, Northeast Utilities, and they are planning to import 1,200 megawatts of big hydropower from Hydro-Quebec in Canada and bring it down from the border of Canada through New Hampshire, 180 miles of proposed towers that could be anywhere from 85 to 135 feet. Down through the White Mountain Forest and other sections, and they need 40 miles of new land in order to connect the dots. And so Jack Savage and the Forest Society have been busy listening to the New Hampshire people who have been opposed to this project, thousands across New Hampshire and across the United States who have helped support the Trees Not Tower project. And they have said they are not interested in having this project. The state government has done very little, if anything, to help with that, stopping the project. But the Forest Society, I would say, has been the largest force in actually really making a difference. Besides the eminent domain, actually, that's been a big thing too, stopping eminent domain from taking the land. So Jack, good morning.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, and let's talk about your new piece of land that has been purchased.
Right, so the Forest Society has since December of 2010 opposed Northern Pass as proposed. There may be some way or some reason to bring more of this large-scale hydro from Canada to southern New England market, but bringing it across more than 1,100 towers, 180 miles, including impacting conserved lands along the way, most notably the White Mountain National Forest, but including our own Rocks Estate, the Washburn Reservation, the Kaufman Forest in Stark, and more than 30 other conserved lands owned by towns, the state, and other conservation organizations. We feel like we have a ethical and legal obligation to protect those lands from what amounts to commercial development. There's been no determination whatsoever that this power is needed or benefits, in particular, anyone in New Hampshire. It does benefit, presumably, Northeast Utilities and Hydro-Quebec. But we've stood with the preponderance of people around the state who have concluded that this is not a project that should be built as proposed. So we're working on a number of fronts to try to change the outcome, to see if there can be, if it's going to be built, to see it built in a way that doesn't damage New Hampshire's landscape. And that's taken a couple of different steps. One, as you mentioned, there's 40 to 50 miles of area north of Groveton where there is no existing transmission line. It's the kind of landscape where there should never be this kind of transmission line. Northern Pass has been attempting to buy their way through that landscape, paying exorbitant amounts of money, most recently $4 million for about 20 acres up there, in order to try to put these towers and power lines across that landscape.
So the prices are going up and up as they get more and more desperate.
They have. There's not much more for them to buy, and we have that route blocked. We're fairly confident in that. We've entered into agreements with about 15 different landowners at this point to ultimately put conservation easements on their land that would prohibit this kind of commercial development, transmission lines.
Right on.
And I think it's pretty clear that this is working. Northern Pass has delayed their promised announcement of this route for coming up on 2 years now. People don't realize it's been that long. June of 2011, they had said that they would announce a new route when the people of New Hampshire had such strong reaction and opposition to their original proposal. They didn't continue to say that they would announce a route sometime later that year, by the end of the year, in the first part of 2012, by May of 2012, by June of 2012, by August of 2012, by October of 2012, by the end of 2012, by early 2013. In February, they said they would be announcing a route in a few weeks. They suggested that they would be announcing a route at the end of the March, and here it is, middle of May, and no route. I think one of the primary reasons for that is because their intended route is blocked, and that's by design on our part, and we're very confident that that block will hold. They cannot get through where they intend to get through.
So now they're saying, and you officials now say Northern Pass will be completed in mid-2017. No, not possibly. They say this is going to happen.
Well, one of the things,
yeah.
That was a comment that Mr. Olivier made to stock analysts and so forth.
Yes.
And that was under quite a bit of questioning from those folks about what was really going wrong with the project. Why weren't they able to announce their route? Was it the opposition? Was it the blocking action that we've taken? Was it,
right.
They're concerned about whether Hydro-Quebec itself is asking questions and considering different options, perhaps with other transmission developers, options to bury it, options to go through Vermont. There are other options that can be looked at, and so the analysts are concerned that maybe Hydro-Quebec is getting impatient with NU and the Northern Pass project, and they've missed so many deadlines, and so they were quizzing the NU execs about that. The analysts were concerned too that perhaps the economics of the energy market have changed to the extent that Northern Pass doesn't make as much sense from a money-making standpoint. And that's what Northern Pass is at the end of the day. It's a commercial venture, it's a private commercial venture in order to compete in the electrical market and allow Hydro-Quebec to ideally bring in more energy at a lower cost. And given the dramatic decrease in the cost of natural gas, that landscape has changed since this project was proposed, and so the analysts are rightly asking questions, what's going on here, why the delay, and Northeast Utilities execs were trying to fight back at that and express some confidence. What perhaps they're forgetting is that it ultimately is not up to them. There is a public process here, and there's any number of permits that have to be acquired. There's the presidential permit, there's a special use permit through the White Mountain National Forest, and ultimately a site evaluation committee has to sign off on this proposal. And as if we've seen just recently with a proposal for a wind facility in Antrim, the FCC is willing to say no. And in that case, part of the reason they said was because of the visual impact. And so none of the permits are a given.
Okay.
And they're trying to, have the analysts ignore that fact.
So, okay, so with the blocking action has been one of the absolute strongest, most effective ways that has delayed this project. So the only way that they can get a route is they have to either choose another route, I would think, to get, they're either going to have to choose another provider, like you said, another pathway with perhaps another electric company or utility company, or there's word that they're going to try to get around some of these public lands.
Right. I think what you're referring to is, one of the things that prevents them from trying to create a route is a conservation easement on the Connecticut Lake Headwaters project. This is an easement on 146,000 acres that is owned by the Forest Land Group.
Right.
And the easement is held by the state of New Hampshire.
Okay.
We're quite confident that that's not possible. It's simply illegal.
It's illegal.
Even if all parties wanted to have it happen, it could not happen.
Okay, so I just wanted to really send that home to the people who are listening and saying maybe they can get by on that.
Yeah, I don't think so. There's no amount of money or no loophole whatsoever in order to penetrate that easement. We're quite confident in that.
Okay.
I'm not saying that they won't try,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying that there might be activity in a courtroom relative to this. I'm saying that we're very confident that it won't happen.
Okay, that's
because it can't happen.
huge.
Yeah.
So that would mean they're blocked.
Well, right. For this project, for
the upper
their
40.
intended route,
Right.
we have blocked their intended route. That's what we've set out to do. However, we're thinking a little bit longer term here.
Okay.
They now have spent upwards of $40 million on land that they would someday like to link and build 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know how many potential transmission lines. As you know, Heather, Hydro-Quebec has a business plan that includes not only sending the 1,200 megawatts of hydropower that Northern Pass represents, but another 3,000 or 4,000 megawatts of power.
Right.
And so
Yes.
we fear, and I think rightfully so, that there's a potential for industrializing the northern New Hampshire landscape. And our intent is to prevent that no matter what, and prevent it permanently.
Okay.
And so that's why we're working with an extended network of landowners to make sure that there's no other way, not just their intended route where they've acquired property, but no other way that they can find a route through the North Country. To that end, we recently closed an easement on 295 acres owned by the Lewis family in Columbia, New Hampshire. And we can turn to our map here and I can show you where that is.
Yeah, let's do that because...
Okay.
All right, so here's their intended route outlined in the purple parcels up here, and we've got them blocked here, and we've got them blocked here, and they attempted to go around here, but we've working with some landowners to block them here.
Okay.
And as we looked at this landscape, we have Pittsburgh up here, the northernmost part of New Hampshire, Canada, Clarksville, Stewartstown, Colebrook, and Columbia. And what they're trying to do is get over here to eastern Coos County so they can drop down and potentially link in with the Coos Loop, which would take them back west. And they had acquired a piece of property down here that abuts the balsams landscape that we protected about 1.5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so we wanted to make sure that there was never the opportunity for them to squeeze through between, this is the Nash Stream State Forest, and the balsams. And so the Lewis family here owns 295 acres. It's a beautiful piece of land. They've owned it for generations, and they have a very strong land ethic and conservation ethic. And so they've been interested in conserving that parcel regardless of Northern Pass. And there are many reasons to conserve it. You'll notice here that it connects this conserved balsams landscape, this green, with the conserved Nash Stream State Forest.
Yeah.
And that connectivity is something that we value within conservation. And it creates a larger regional network of connected conserved lands. From a wildlife standpoint and a water protection standpoint, these larger areas that are conserved are really important. There's a number of other conservation values that are protected with this easement. There's a roaring brook that feeds the Mohawk River that goes into the Connecticut River. So this is essentially part of the headwater streams in the watershed, the Connecticut River watershed. Tremendous wildlife habitat. It will continue to be used for forest management, recreation, and of course enjoyment by the family itself.
Seems like you just about got them boxed in there, that piece of property. It's like they're surrounded with easements.
Well, that's our goal, is to ensure that this landscape won't be used for high voltage transmission lines that industrialize. But it's now a rural working landscape that is one of the truly special places in New Hampshire. Once again, I would reiterate that we're opposed to Northern Pass as proposed.
Right.
And there are other ways that energy can be transmitted from Canada to southern New England if that is ever deemed a worthwhile thing to do. I think there's some question still today whether it's at all needed. Certainly you see that other power generators in New England are opposed to this.
Yes.
You know, if you look at it, there was a similar project, I think you know this, Heather, in over in Vermont and New York, the Champlain Hudson Express, which was recently permitted. And over there, the IBEW, the Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, were opposed to that project because they recognized that their long-term prospects, jobs for them, their members, were most likely to come from homegrown power generators.
Really?
And while Northern Pass likes to tout the potential for jobs, those are largely short-term jobs. Many of those will be filled from people from out of state.
Right.
And the idea is that we are subjecting our local power generators to a tremendous amount of foreign competition that won't necessarily be in our interest.
It wouldn't be in our interest because it would displace the jobs that we have. Yes.
Isn't this true even with New Hampshire, that the IBEW, the job's going to be bid out to other states? According to Joe Casey, the job's going to be bid out. It doesn't mean the job's going to be taken up by New Hampshire linemen or New Hampshire construction workers. It'll be bid out.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with those that particular level of detail, George, so I can't comment on that. But I think there are fundamental questions about the claims that Northern Pass is making relative to their jobs claims and their tax impacts and so forth. And that's what we've seen over time, is that the purported benefits that they've suggested would occur if this project were built simply are a mirage, and I think we've come to that conclusion. Certainly.
Well, they've done a good job at spinning it in certain ways, because I follow along with the newspaper articles, and you often get people commenting, and there's a subset of people that comment that really believe that anybody who stops the Northern Pass is stopping job opportunities, and that magically this kind of power coming down from Hydro-Quebec is going to lower their electric costs. But I don't think they understand that when they say they will lower the cost of electricity by $200 to $300 million for that state, that divides up into probably less than $1 a month for the average household.
Yeah, I'm not sure that those people who are promoting Northern Pass aren't the very same ones who are part of Northern Pass. We've just been, we found it remarkable, the breadth of opposition to Northern Pass. And so I don't know that there's many people around at all who buy into those arguments. And our experience,
but I only mention this because of those people, that they actually need to understand how little, if any, or the negative impact of the Northern Pass.
Right. Our point, and that's why we come back to this. We oppose Northern Pass as proposed. Someday, there may be some value in allowing Hydro-Quebec to export power to southern New England. They already do across the line that goes through Vermont and New Hampshire. One of the things that we've come to realize recently is that that line isn't fully utilized.
Okay.
It's designed to be a 2,000 megawatt line, and in fact it's not being used anywhere near its full capacity. And National Grid has recently asked to conduct an economic impact study to determine what and how what kind of impacts there might be if they were allowed to use that line to its full capacity. So here's the big question about that. If the existing high voltage line that goes through Vermont and New Hampshire to Ayer, Mass, that is used for the most part to transport hydropower from Hydro-Quebec to southern New England, not completely, but for the most part, if that's not being fully utilized, if it's only being used 60% of its capacity, and the other 40% of its capacity represents fully half of what Northern Pass could do, why on earth are we even talking about building a whole new line? It makes no sense whatsoever.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
Northern Pass is clearly premature, at best, if it should ever be built at all. Then, there's the other thing that this reveals is it's not only hydropower that crosses that line. And as Hydro-Quebec attempts to compete in North America with falling natural gas prices,
Right.
They too are looking at diversifying their energy use. So it's not just hydro. So that when energy can be generated more cost effectively with natural gas, that they have that capacity to generate with natural gas and sell that power. So it's important to remember that Northern Pass is a transmission line. It's a commercial transmission line. That's all it is. It really has nothing to do with renewable power. There's no guarantee that renewable power will cross over those lines.
Okay.
There's no guarantee that power will only cross in one direction. It's a bidirectional line. And that's what I think is important to remember about Northern Pass. It's a private, exclusively for the use of Hydro-Quebec, commercial transmission line project. Nothing more, nothing less. It provides few of any benefits to New Hampshire, and it has incredible damaging impact on New Hampshire, especially in places like the White Mountain National Forest.
Absolutely. Well, that's hard to argue with. I guess I'm still baffled as to why they're pushing it, but their latest spin is to say that we're over reliant on natural gas.
Well, that's their attempt to move to a different talking point and a different marketing pitch in order to try to sell their project. Look, there's no mystery why they want to do this. It's all about competition. It's all about, and in our society, we embrace competition. Competition can be good, and but it doesn't mean it should be done at the cost of a public resource like the scenic and conserved landscapes of New Hampshire. It shouldn't be at the cost of the tourism industry. It shouldn't be at the cost of our biomass and forest products industry. Right. And that's the problem with it. It's not the problem. It's not the fact that they like to compete in the open market selling power and transmitting power. That's perfectly acceptable. It's how they propose to do it. And that's where the Forest Society comes out. If you want to do this, you need to find another way that doesn't damage New Hampshire's landscapes.
Right. Yes, George?
Just at the meeting the other day, you were there Tuesday, weren't you? At the representatives meeting?
No, I was not.
You weren't?
No.
Oh, okay. Where our Senate Majority Leader came out and said that we need to take a better look at undergrounding options for the Northern Pass. Yes. He came out and said that at that meeting. I don't know, you weren't there, but he did come out and say we need to take a...
Sure, there's a lot of people that are interested in looking at a potential burial option, and we certainly would support taking a closer look at that. I think there is a potential win-win here, given that the state, through the SB 361 Commission that Senator Forrester chaired last fall, that concluded that that burial along state transportation corridors is a viable option. And as we look to the future, to the extent that there may be some reason, some viable purpose for transmitting more power from Canada to southern New England, you know, the win-win here is that now you have potentially the political will in New Hampshire to make it possible for a transmission developer to make use of the existing transportation corridors to bury a transmission line like this. The technology is there. Hydro-Quebec has been involved in developing something and making use of that technology. And so there's really no reason not to pursue that as a potential option, and a lot of people are looking to that.
Now, would that have to be a contract between, say, the state of New Hampshire and Hydro-Quebec? So PSNH would have to lose that contract?
Well, you know, I think it's a different kind of proposal.
Right.
And what's important here is that, and one of the things that the Northern Pass project has done is gotten the attention of New Hampshire, the state of New Hampshire. And to the extent that there is now the interest to look quickly and closely at how it could be done, that represents great potential for anyone who might want to develop a transmission line from point A to point B. So that could be NU and PSNH. It could be another transmission developer. I don't think there's necessarily at this point any limitation. And which brings another interesting point, that if New Hampshire is going to suffer the consequences of building a transmission line, should that not be put out to bid? Should we not solicit other potential transmission developers who may be more willing to do a better way than Northeast Utilities seems
Correct,
to
and then
to do.
at least there would be some money that would go to the state for that transmission
Potentially.
line to go down the
Potentially.
right of way.
Potentially.
I would think.
There are certainly some lawmakers who see that
Yeah.
as a positive thing. Last thing I'll leave you with is there's been a lot of focus and attention up north and our blocking action up north and so forth, but we still maintain that it's not clear that Northeast Utilities has the authority to make use of existing PSNH distribution rights-of-way between Groveton and Deerfield,
Okay.
including down into Franklin and through Concord and so forth, for a private high-voltage transmission line.
Okay.
This is a third-party transmission line that was not envisioned when those rights-of-way originally granted, and they very well may represent an unreasonable use of those rights-of-way. And so, to the extent that this project might go forward, I think you can expect us to be looking to challenge PSNH's ability to give Hydro-Quebec the right to essentially build a transmission line in people's backyards who never envisioned, intended, or were ever made aware that could be a possibility.
So that would happen in a court of law?
Well, to the extent that they would presumably be unwilling to say, oh yeah, we agree with you, we're not going to do it, presumably we would have to find a way to...
So you're willing to take action,
we're certainly
legal
looking,
action?
We certainly have engaged attorneys to take a close look at that.
Well, I have to say thank you for that, because our state government has been sort of ineffective in that arena. We do have people in the state government working for us. They're just outnumbered. Okay, I mean, we've mentioned Jeannie Forrester, and then there's Ray Burton. There's been Suzanne Smith, who's a representative, Paul Simard, who's a former representative, and various other people who have been working on our side the whole way. And then there's other people who have not.
Well, you know, state government and politics, it's you know, the common analogy is it's a sausage factory, and so it gets messy sometimes, and it's a forum for debate from all sides, and so I'm not sure we would be willing to say that the state hasn't necessarily stepped forward. It's a process, and what we see is that as time goes on, as we move from a marketing pitch that Northern Pass has made to understanding more of the details about what Northern Pass really is, a private commercial transmission line. You're seeing more and more elected officials come to the conclusion that at the very best there's a better way to do it, and perhaps there's reason not to do it at all.
Okay.
And so,
So there's promise.
I think there's a tremendous amount of progress.
And hope.
I think, from our standpoint,
Okay.
that we are making good progress on our goal, which is to oppose Northern Pass as proposed.
Yep.
And we would certainly welcome Northeast Utilities and PSNH to put forward something other than what they have said that they wanted to do from day one. They have never once even entertained the option for discussion of doing something any other way than what they want to do.
That's correct. Well, thank you so much for talking to us again today and filling us in on the latest details of the blocking action of the Forest Society in Concord, and you've done so much so far, so I want to encourage people to contribute to your cause, Trees Not Towers, and if you want to go ahead and just mention that information.
Sure, if you just go to our website, www.forestsociety.org, you can find information about Northern Pass. You can take a look at maps. You can go to our Trees Not Towers blogs, and if you care to contribute to the cause, we're happy to have you aboard. We've had more than 3,000 people donate to the Trees Not Towers campaign from more than half the states in the country and over 200 towns in New Hampshire. This is a statewide issue and statewide opposition. There's no question in our mind.
Thank you. And we'll be here again in the future with more updates with Jack, I'm sure.
Thanks very much, Heather.